Do you see Arkansas taking a step back record-wise this year? There are some harsh allegations that have floated around the 24/7 Sports and Late Kick offices lately, namely that I'm an Arkansas homer. And so Jesse and the crew, they have picked up on some anomalies and some trends in the shows. And it is that I am mentioning Arkansas disproportionate to other programs. And they are now accusing me, because of that trend, of favoring Arkansas, to which I plead pretty much guilty. I do like Arkansas. Didn't grow up there. We do have an Arkansas shout-out coming later, but yeah, I like Arkansas, so sue me. Don't. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to do. But I am telling you, I got no problem with Arkansas, so maybe I do lean that way just a little bit. But taking a step back, what does that mean? That's the question here. Are they going to take a step back next year? Well, they went 9-4 this past year. Now, normally when people ask, is this team going to take a step back? It just flat out means, are they going to win less games than they did last year? Well, when you play in a volatile minefield of a division like Arkansas does in the SEC West, sometimes, believe it or not, you can end up having a worse record one year than you did another year, but have an equal production level, or maybe even a slightly better production level. Saying all that to say I'm not ready to give you a win-loss record prediction for Arkansas this coming year, but if you look at what they did last year, they opened against food. Rule number one on this show, never lose to food. So they opened against Rice. They got it done against Rice. Then they thumped Texas, and that's really when they started popping a little bit on the national radar. Then a couple weeks later, they beat A&M. Then they really popped on everyone's national radar. But then when they lost to Georgia, everyone kind of said, okay, they weren't for real. And that crowd, by the way, the crowd that said Arkansas is not for real because they didn't beat the eventual national champion on the road in Athens, is the same crowd who tells you those New Year's Day games are meaningless if they don't have playoff implications riding on them. Distance yourselves from those people. Because believe it or not, there is this middle ground. It's massive, actually. There's a middle ground between the playoff caliber teams and then the bad teams. And Arkansas was in that middle ground, as is a huge chunk of the sport any given year. Arkansas was actually probably higher up on the food chain in the middle ground than most programs were. Because then they lost to Ole Miss. It was that classic, I think that was that October 9th day where everything crazy popped off all over the place. They lost by a point there, and then they lost to Auburn. Point being, they disappeared off everyone's radar, but then they rebounded and they won 1, 2, 3, 5 of their last 6 games, and then they won the bowl game, I think. So, yeah, they very well could take a step back. I think it's equal or maybe a little bit more likely that production-wise they're better this coming year. But if you just look ahead to their 2022 schedule, listen to this. Now, if you're listening on podcast and you can't see the graphic, they open against Cincinnati. Well, Cincinnati's better than Rice. You know, so last year they opened with a much easier opponent. And then they jump right into conference play. They got South Carolina week 2. They got A&M week 4. They got Bama week 5. Oh, and by the way, it's insane when you look at this. I know, look, there is no gimme win on this entire schedule. Their out-of-conference games are Cincinnati. Missouri State's the only gimme, okay? I'll give them that. Missouri State is the gimme there. That's the FCS game. But they've got Cincinnati, they go to Brigham Young, and they've got Liberty. Those are their out-of-conference games, on top of playing in the toughest division in America. And so you're telling me, well, the question is not directed this way, but a lot of people would tell me if they don't win at least 9 games, they didn't improve. Please, man, you could reasonably play at a top 15 level and go 8-4 against that schedule. In fact, in any given year, you may have 4 or 5 top 10 to top 15 caliber teams on that schedule, just the way it normally shakes out. So I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, is what I'm trying to tell you. You've got to look a lot more intricately at Arkansas than just what the win-loss record ends up being, because that is as brutal a schedule as you will ever draw. I mean, hats off to them for challenging themselves up there, but if any time in history of the sport there was a reason to just load up like a bakery on cupcake after cupcake in the out-of-conference, it would be in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and yet they don't do it.